There's a voice inside your head you stopped noticing years ago. It runs in the background while you're working, while you're commuting, while you're deciding whether the holiday is too expensive or the takeaway is justified. It sounds like, when I hit the number, then. Then I'll relax. Then I'll travel. Then I'll spend time with the people I love. Then I'll figure out what I actually want to do with my life when I'm free. The whole architecture of your inner life is built around that then. Every sacrifice, every spreadsheet, every coffee you don't buy, all of it in service of the person waiting for you on the other side of the number, the version of you who will finally be allowed to live. But what nobody tells you is that person doesn't exist. They're not waiting for you on the other side of the finish line. They were supposed to be built, and you were too busy building the spreadsheet to build them. That is the lie at the heart of FIRE. The lie is not that the maths is wrong, the maths is right. The lie is not that the financial independence isn't real, it very much is. The lie is that the journey to financial independence is a journey toward freedom. It isn't. It's a journey toward the conditions for freedom, and the conditions are not the freedom itself. For years, pursuing FIRE becomes your identity. It's what you are, the saver, the optimizer, the disciplined one, the person with the plan. That identity gives you purpose every single day. Every decision has a reason. Every sacrifice has a destination. And then one day you arrive. The wealth is real. The identity collapses. The purpose evaporates. And the future version of you, who was supposed to enjoy all of this, turns out to be a stranger you never met. You've built the career, you're building the portfolio, you're close to freedom. So what now? Welcome to Life After Enough, money, meaning, and the life you design when work becomes optional. I'm Nick, I'm racing towards early retirement and figuring out who I become when the job no longer dictates what I do with my time. Let's get into it. So, last week I told you about the golden window and that it's closing. I told you to consider cranking the savings rate to maximum, to harvest your earnings while AI hasn't fully repriced your work yet, to front load every dollar of discipline you have. And I stand by every word of that. But here's what the playbook doesn't tell you. Every sacrifice you make, every dollar you save, every hour you optimize, you're not just building a portfolio. You're building a person who saves, a person who optimizes, a person who sacrifices. And that person has no idea what to do when the building is over. And that's what we're going to look at today. 4 ways the journey trains you, what that training quietly costs you, and whether any of it can be undone. So the first one is the frugality ratchet. Every single FIRE blog, every single podcast in this space, and every forum you'll read, they all point to the same direction. Spend less, save more. The gap between income and expenses is your freedom. And it works. The math is clean. A higher savings rate gets you there faster, and I'm not disputing that. But here's what happens inside your head over 5, 10, 15 years of practicing it. You develop a reflexive aversion to spending, not a considered values-based approach. A flinch, an automatic emotional resistance to money going out. You start to experience spending as a kind of loss, not as an exchange. Money for joy, money for time with people, money for the experience itself, but as a loss. Every transaction then becomes a subtraction from the number, and the number is the thing you've been taught to worship. I noticed this in myself a few years ago, and it really disturbed me. I'd be at dinner with friends, enjoying myself, and a part of my brain would be calculating. Not whether I could afford it, I could afford it, but whether the meal was worth it relative to what that money could become if invested. I was sitting with people I loved, eating food I enjoyed, and running compound interest calculations in the background. That's not financial discipline. That's a frugality ratchet in motion. And the thing about a ratchet is that it only goes one way. Each year of frugality tightens it further. By the time you hit your number, the ratchet is so tight, you can't loosen it, even when you're allowed to. It's not a habit anymore. It's then a personality trait, and it's part of how you describe yourself. The second way that the journey trains you is around delayed gratification. So, FIRE is essentially a masterclass in delayed gratification. And it's a real skill. The ability to sacrifice now for something better later is one of the most reliable predictors of long term success. But FIRE doesn't just teach you to delay, it teaches you to always delay, to always choose later over now, to treat the present as something to be endured and the future as something to be optimized for. The problem is that later keeps moving. First, it's I'll enjoy life when I hit $100,000. Then, when I hit Coast Fire. Then, when I hit the full number. Then, when I've had a full year of post-fire data to prove the withdrawals work. And then, when the kids are through university. And then, well, when exactly? For a lot of people, later never becomes now because the muscle for enjoying the present has atrophied. They've been in training for so long that delayed gratification isn't a strategy anymore, it's who they are. The third way the journey changes you is around optimization. If you're in the FIRE community, you optimize everything. The thing, though, about optimization is that it's addictive. It feels super productive and it feels like progress. Every time you shave another year off your timeline, you get a little dopamine hit. You're solving a puzzle. You're good at it and it feels like control. This is what last week's Golden Window Playbook plugs straight into. Maximizing income, harvest the window, stack the income streams, set the deadline. All correct, all necessary, all also feeding the same muscle. Because optimization has no natural stopping point. There's always another variable to adjust, or another scenario to model, another edge case to prepare for. And once you've optimized yourself to financial independence, the habit doesn't stop. It will just find new targets. You start optimizing your withdrawal strategy with the same intensity you optimized your savings rate. You optimize your free time, your hobbies, your relationships. You approach life after enough with the same relentless efficiency that got you there. And in doing so, you squeeze all the spontaneity and all the messiness and all the joy out of the thing you worked so hard to build. Freedom that's been optimized within an inch of its life isn't really freedom anymore. It's more of a sophisticated cage. Final way that the journey trains you is around vigilance. FIRE requires you to be constantly aware of your finances, track, measure, monitor. During that building phase, that vigilance is appropriate and necessary. You do need to know where you stand. The feedback loop of watching your net worth grow is part of what keeps you going through the hard years and the boring middle. But somewhere along the way, the vigilance stops being a tool and becomes compulsion. My husband mentioned to me only last night that I talk about money too much and that he's never met anyone else like me. You don't check your portfolio because you need the information. You check it because not checking feels dangerous. The daily price movements mean nothing over a 30-year horizon, and you know that, but you still check anyway because the habit of monitoring has fused with your sense of safety. I talked about this in episode 14 on being emotionally ready to retire, the gap between financial safety and felt safety. What I want to name here is more specific. The FIRE journey actively builds this compulsion. It's not a pre-existing condition you brought to the table. The methodology trains you to be hyper-vigilant about money. Then, when you arrive at the destination and hypervigilance is no longer useful, you can't turn it off because you've spent years strengthening that muscle. Quick one before we continue. I send a weekly email every Monday morning that goes deeper than the podcast. It's not a recap, it's a separate idea, usually something more personal, plus a question to sit with for the week. It's free, it's one email, and you can sign up at lifeafterenough.com. Link is in the show notes. Okay, back to it. So what does all of that cost you? FIRE people are exceptional at tracking what they've gained. The net worth chart going up, the milestones crossed, the years shaved off, the working timeline, all measurable, all satisfying, all real. But there's an audit that nobody actually does though, the cost audit. And this isn't a financial cost audit, it's a human one. What did the pursuit of FIRE actually take from you in the years that you were building? Now, I'm not asking this to be dramatic. I'm asking because I did this audit on myself. And the answers were a little uncomfortable. So the first one, the friendships that thinned. How many invitations did you say no to because the restaurant was too expensive? How many trips did you skip because the flights didn't fit the budget? How many times did you suggest a cheaper alternative when the group actually wanted the original plan? Until eventually they stopped including you in the conversation because they didn't want the negotiation. Frugality has a social cost. Over time, if you're always the one pulling the group towards cheaper, people will adjust. They don't stop liking you, they just stop including you in certain things. But the outcome of this is not that the friendships break, but instead they thin, they become shallower. You see people less, you share fewer experiences. And by the time you hit your number and you're finally ready to spend and join in, some of those relationships have atrophied to the point where you don't really know how to turn them back on. I'm not saying you should just spend recklessly to maintain friendships, but I am saying that the calculation of is this dinner worth $40 should probably include the variable, what is this relationship worth to me over the next 30 years? The second one is around experiences you didn't have. Every no was a bit of a bet, a gamble. A bet that the future version of you would have better, richer experiences than the one that you're turning down now. Sometimes that bet plays off. The financial freedom you build genuinely does enable a different life later on. But some experiences have an expiry date. The trip with your university friends in your late 20s hits different from the same trip in your late 40s. The spontaneous weekend away when you're young and unencumbered definitely isn't the same as the meticulously planned one decades later. The festival you skipped at 27 to save $400, well, you can't get that version of it back. You can go to a festival at 45, it just won't be that festival with those people at that place in time. FIRE asks you to trade present experiences for future freedom. Often that's a good trade, but it's never a free trade, and pretending otherwise is part of the lie. And then we turn to the years that you were physically present, but mentally not there. And this one is the hardest one. During the building years, how often were you physically present but mentally compounding? Sitting at dinner with your partner but thinking about the market, playing with your kids whilst calculating whether you could retire a year earlier if you switch pension providers, on holiday but tracking the daily spend against a budget. The obsession with the future steals presence. The cruel part is this: the freedom you're building is supposed to be giving you more present moments, but you've spent years practicing absence. You've become very, very good at not being where you are. And those years don't refund. The dinners are over, the kids are older. The partner remembers the version of you who was always somewhere else. You can change going forward, but you can't undo the practice. So with everything we've said so far, is FIRE wrong? I want to be really clear before we go any further, because I can already hear the objections forming. FIRE changed my life. The framework, understanding compound interest, the 4% rule, the power of time in the market, that all gave me something I never had before. A path, a way out of the corporate grind that didn't require winning the lottery, inheriting money, or being lucky. It was available to anyone with income and discipline. The maths works. The methodology works. Millions of people have used it to build genuine, lasting financial security. And the alternative, spending everything, saving nothing, hoping someone takes care of you later, is meaningfully much worse. So I'm absolutely not here to tear down FIRE. But I'm here to say this. FIRE is a brilliant tool for getting you to the door, but it has almost nothing to say about what happens when you walk through it. Think about what the FIRE community actually teaches. Accumulate, invest, reduce expenses, track, optimize, reach the number, and then retire early. That's where the roadmap ends, though. The last line of every FIRE blog is essentially, and then you're free. Well, free to do what? Free to be who? Free to feel what? There's no manual for the after. No framework for unlearning the habits that got you there. No guidance on how to spend without guilt, rest without anxiety, or be present without an optimization agenda. No conversation about the psychological damage that a decade of hyperfrugality and hypervigilance might have caused. No acknowledgement that the person who arrives at the number might be fundamentally different and in some ways more broken than the person who started the journey. The FIRE community is spectacular at teaching you to build a financial engine, but it's almost completely silent on what to do when it's time to turn that engine off. So, no, FIRE isn't wrong, but I do think it's incomplete, and there's a massive difference there. A hammer isn't wrong because it can't screw in a bolt, but if someone hands you a hammer and says, "This is all you need to build a house," well, they've misled you. You need more tools. You need the ones that nobody talks about. You need the tools that help you unlearn hyperfrugality and develop a healthy relationship with spending. The tools that decouple your sense of safety from your net worth. The tools that teach you to be present instead of perpetually future-oriented. The tool that lets you stop optimizing and actually live. FIRE gets you financially free. These other tools get you actually free. Without them, you're just a wealthy person who can't enjoy their wealth, which, if we're being honest, is tragic. So I'm not going to pretend I can undo a decade of programming in 4 minutes. I can't. And I'm in this work right now, and I'd be lying if I said I cracked it. But here's what the early stages have looked like for me. The first thing was naming it, accepting that some of what I called discipline was actually damage, that my financial prudence was sometimes anxiety, but just in a more sensible outfit. It sounds obvious when I say it now, but it took me a really long time to even acknowledge. Because as long as you're proud of the muscle that's hurting you, you can't begin to let it relax. The second thing was deliberately practicing the opposite of what FIRE taught me. Nothing reckless, but being very deliberate with it instead. Some of that has been small, spending without calculating the compound cost, saying yes to things that brought joy without running them through a value for money filter first, taking a day off without filling it with something productive, just sitting in a cafe and doing nothing, and not calling it wasted time. But the real turning points for me, the moments where something actually shifted, were bigger than that. It was in the sabbatical. Not a busy one, but a slow one. No project, no productivity goals. No, while I'm off, I'll also do X, Y, and Z. I eventually gave myself permission just to slow down without optimizing the slowing down. And after a few weeks of it, my sense of time started changing. I stopped measuring days by what I produced. I started measuring them by what I'd actually been a part of. The sabbatical didn't fix anything, but for the first time in my adult life, I had felt a sense of what the alternative actually looked like. And once you've felt it, you can't pretend you don't know. The other big thing was my wedding and honeymoon. They were, by a long way, the biggest single expenses I've made in my adult life. And the fire brain in me had plenty to say in the lead up. The compound calculations were brutal, the little voice listing what that money could become if invested instead. I felt all of it. And I spent it anyway. On a wedding I'll remember for the rest of my life. And on a honeymoon I let myself fully experience with the love of my life. It didn't break me. The portfolio is still there, the plan is still working, and what I have now is something the spreadsheet was never going to generate. The felt and lived experience of having actually done the thing, instead of the slow accumulation of regret about postponing it. These aren't small things. They're not small for anyone who spent years optimizing every hour and every dollar. Doing them on purpose feels almost transgressive. It's like learning to write with your other hand, which is going to feel clumsy and uncomfortable and slow. But if you want to use both hands for writing, you've got to do it. The third thing was changing the metric. For years, the metric was the net worth. Progress was purely financial and everything else was just secondary. Now I'm trying to measure something different, which is presence. Not how much did I accumulate today, but was I actually here for my life today? That's a harder thing to track. There's no app for it, but it definitely is more important than the number. The fourth thing connects back to last week. Coast Fire isn't just a financial strategy, it's a forcing function as well. Once you don't need to keep maximizing, you have to figure out what to do with that. You can keep sprinting and call it ambition, that's the trap, or you can stop, sit with the discomfort, and slowly remember what you actually wanted in the first place. The golden window logic gets you there, but it doesn't tell you what to do once you arrive. That work is on you. And finally, the fifth thing, and this is the one that connects back to the whole reason why this podcast exists, is talking about it. Because the FIRE community doesn't talk about this very much, or is only just starting to. The forums are still full of people celebrating the milestones and debating withdrawal rates. They're not full of people saying, I hit my number and I'm still anxious, and I think the journey might have broken something in me. Those people definitely exist. There's a lot of them. They think they're the only ones, and they're not. So here's what I believe, and I believe it more strongly than anything else I've said on this show. FIRE is one of the most powerful frameworks ever created. It has given ordinary people a credible, repeatable path to financial independence, and that really, really matters. The people who built this community and shared this knowledge have changed millions of lives for the better. But the framework definitely has a blind spot, and the blind spot is this. It treats the arrival as the end, when the arrival is actually the beginning. It assumes freedom is the destination, when freedom is actually the starting condition for a whole new set of challenges that the maths can't solve. The lie isn't that FIRE doesn't work, because it most definitely does. The lie is that the work is over once you get there, because it definitely isn't. The maths got you there, the maths can't then take you any further. Everything after the number is human work. The work of learning to spend, the work of learning to rest, the work of being present instead of perpetually future-oriented, the work of building an identity that isn't defined by a net worth figure, the work of feeling enough, not just having enough, and the work of becoming the person you were supposed to meet on the other side of the number. That's the work this podcast is about, not the spreadsheet or the number, the life after the number. Last week's Golden Window Playbook gets you to the door. This is what happens when you walk through it. Thanks for listening to Life After Enough, a podcast about money, meaning, and the life you design when work becomes optional. If this episode made you rethink your future, share it with someone who's starting to question the script too. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Nick, and I'll see you next week as we keep building a life that's truly ours.